Okay, good morning everyone. Turn with me to Hebrews chapter 5. We're starting in Hebrews chapter 5 this morning. We've obviously done the first 4 chapters already. Give you a little recap quickly this morning about what we've done so far. And I guarantee you we will not get through the chapter 5 this morning, but at least we'll get into that. And the next time I'll come up, we'll just carry on slowly but surely working our way through that. If any one of you guys need any notes on Hebrews that I've done to the first 4 chapters, I'm happy to share those notes with you and email it to you, so you guys will have to let me know if you want those, okay? So let's go read Hebrews chapter 5. Let's go read chapter 4 from verse 14, and we'll go into chapter 5. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may attain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. Now, just to make sure that we understand, he is writing this to the believing remnant of the nation of Israel, and it's the Hebrew epistle, and it's to Israel, okay, as a whole. So as a whole, but specifically the believing remnant, but as a whole needs to believe this too. Chapter 5. For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men and things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. And by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for sins. And no man taketh this honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. So also Christ glorified not himself to make an high priest, but he that said unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. As he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him, called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So we're going to read just that far, and introduction, we're going to get into that today. And basically what we're going to cover is a high priest better qualified, Jesus Christ as Israel's high priest, a better qualified high priest than the priest that we know from time past. Okay, so yeah, what we've started out in the beginning, in the first 4 chapters of the book of Hebrews, we started out with Jesus Christ as heir, okay? And we understand it in the book of Hebrews, as we start off in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, what gets resumed? What restarts as it's been suspended for some time? Prophecy, right? And it's a resuming of prophecy after the Pauline epistle. So the book of Hebrews is like a transitional book back into the prophetic word and prophetic in the nation of Israel and God's purpose for the earth, all right? The kingdom message, okay? And what we've seen here in the first 4 chapters, in chapter 1, we've seen he's better than the angels. He's better as the Son of God, but he's also better as the Son of Man, okay? Because that's the unique nature of Christ, being the Son of God and the Son of Man. And we'll learn about that a little bit more as time goes on. Then we got into the second part of it, is Jesus Christ as apostle, that he was better than Moses, all right? He's above Moses, better in office, better in honor, and he provides a better rest. And what we're coming into now is the passage of the scriptures in the section of the book of Hebrews, that he's a better high priest, better qualified, and we're going to see all these things about him being a better pedigree and a better sanctuary. That's what we're going to cover. You see the next slide there on chapters 5 to 10. We're going to see that what we have there is the better order. Okay, he's a better priest. He's better qualified. Chapter 5 verse 1 to 10. That's what we're going to do now. this morning. He's better. He's a better person, better in pedigree. He's a better priest. He's a better minister. He has a better ministry. There's a better sanctuary, a better covenant, a better sacrifice, a better way. Everything is better. Why? Better than what? Better than what? Than what was a shadow before in time past. Everything that up to this time was a shadow. It wasn't the real deal. It wasn't the eternal deal. It was just a shadow of what was to come. And now the book of Hebrews is showing to Israel that he is much better, and he is the true, the eternal, the only one. Okay, and he's their high priest. And then we'll get into the last few chapters of book of Hebrews, chapter 13 to 11 to 13, where it deals with Israel living in the midst of apostasy, that they're going to live there, and that we're going to see in those chapters faith, hope, and love, and we'll come to the conclusion of that book. But we're now in chapter 5, where we start off being a better high priest, and it's not the first time that he's mentioned as a high priest in the book of Hebrews, because it's been mentioned in chapter 2 already. But in chapter 4, verses 14, 15, and 16, he's now starting introducing you to the subject of being the better high priest, okay? And that he is the ultimate, and he is the only real high, eternal high priest. So what we have here, and we're going to look now quickly, and I don't want to say quickly, we'll just go through this list. And we're going to do some comparisons in the book of Hebrews, and to show you that the Lord Jesus Christ as Israel's high priest, and we're going to compare him in the book of Hebrews to the Old Testament, the old priesthood that was only a shadow, compare him to the new priesthood, the eternal priesthood, the true priesthood that God has ordained. Okay, so we're going to do a comparison between those two as we look at the subjects. That's going to be the subject of his priesthood in Hebrews chapter 5 through 10 there. Okay, so look at chapter 7 there. And so the old priesthood was who was the first priest be ordained as ordained and placed and set up and for service in the temple? Aaron, right? Look at chapter 7. Look at chapter 7. Let me just get to my notes here. It will help if I follow the notes. Chapter 7 and verse 11. He says, "If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should be rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not called after the order of" what? Aaron. So the first Old Testament priesthood was after the order of who? Melchizedek or Aaron? Aaron, right? That was the old order. The order of the old priesthood was after Aaron. Every other priest that followed was after the order of Aaron. But when you look at the new priesthood, it's after the order of Melchizedek. Let's go to a couple of passages there. Go to chapter 5 and verse 6. And I find it's very interesting that he is after the order of Melchizedek, and we're going to find out why it is so. But look at chapter 5 and verse 6. "As he said into another place, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." And verse 11, verse 10 says, "Called of God and high priest after the order of" what? Melchizedek. So compared to the Old Testament prophet was after the order of who? A priest, sorry. The Old Testament priest was after the order of who? Aaron. This eternal priesthood and the true priesthood is after the order of what? Melchizedek. Okay. What is the unique thing about Melchizedek? What was the unique thing that Christ was after the order of Melchizedek? We'll see that a little bit later. But what was so unique that after the order of Aaron is after man's calling an institution, but after the order of Melchizedek is after God's order? So what was so different about Melchizedek compared to Aaron? Anybody? Melchizedek was a king and a priest. Okay? And he was the king of Salem, which is the king of peace. You know, can you see where we're going with this? And so, yes, that is right. Good one there. The next one is we're going to see in the shadow, he was mortal. The Old Testament priest was mortal. Go with me to chapter 7 and verse 23. Chapter 7 and verse 23. And they truly were many priests, because they were not suffered to continue by reason of what? What happened to the Old Testament priests? They died. Did they resurrect the third day and come back? No, they died. It was finished. So they needed to get another priest, right? So they mortal, they die. Look at chapter 7. Look at chapter 7, verse 16 and 17. Who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. For he testifieth, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Can you see how the one is mortal and the other one is what? Eternal. Okay? By now Israel must have known by the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, being a better heir, a better son of God, a better as the son of God, better as the son of man, better than Moses. Now he's the better priest. Israel by now in Hebrews chapter 5 should start to get the picture of who Christ was, the one that they crucified and rejected, right? So he's eternal, and that's what the scriptures are doing this comparison with us. He is also, now we see, he is, I should have pressed eternal there, but he's from man. Look at Hebrews chapter 5 as we started reading there this morning. Am I going too fast? All right. Chapter 5 says, for every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. So he's ordained for men, okay, and so and he comes from man, right? So, but this priesthood that we're going to now see that is eternal, that's not mortal, after the order of Melchizedek, he is from God. Look at Hebrews chapter 7, verses 3 to 6, okay? Hebrews chapter 7, verse 3 to 6. For we which have believed to enter into rest, I'm at chapter 4, I'm sorry. I was going to say, that's wrong. Chapter 7, verses 3. Without father and without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. He's talking about Melchizedek. But Christ is after the order of what? No father, no mother, no beginning, no end. Okay, so take the priesthood have a commandment to take the tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithe of Abraham, and blessed him that he had the promises. So, so Christ is what? Is Christ from men, or was he without father and without mother? He was without father and without mother. He's eternal. He has got no beginning, and he has what? No end, right? And so that's not chapter 4, the fourth one there. The sacrifices that the Old Testament priest gave was he continually, yearly, weekly, monthly had to make sacrifices, right? And we're going to see that the other one from God, the true and the Jesus Christ, made a sacrifice once for all. Go to Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews chapter 10. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. So what is it? When I do those sacrifices, does it make them perfect? It's not possible, okay? There's no redemption for them, eternal redemption in that, okay? And so continually they have to make these sacrifices. Look at chapter 9, verse 26. You're right there, 9:26. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once, in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. How many times did he have to do that sacrifice? Only once. Look at chapter 10, verse 12. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. Okay, by the way, I'm looking forward to getting to that verse 26 there of chapter 9. He says, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of the world. The end of the world. That's an interesting statement in that verse. Could chew on that for a bit, okay? Now, the old priesthood had what? What did they sacrifice? Animals. And obviously, what does the new priesthood sacrifice? Himself, right? Look at Hebrews chapter 10. Look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 4. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. Okay? It just atone for the sins temporarily, but doesn't take them away. Doesn't deal with the sin issue. Okay? And so, but in chapter 10, in verse 10, he says, by the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. So who's we there? Who's the we there in verse 10? By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. The believing remnant of the nation of Israel. Okay, at that time. All right? So he offered up himself. The next thing we're going to see in the Old Testament, and we've touched on that a little bit ago, the shadow of the Old Testament priesthood, there was no redemption. Excuse me. Chapter 10, verse 4. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. If it could take away sins, they have what? Redemption. Right? But it's not possible that they could do that. Look at verse 11. And every priest standeth daily ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. Now look at the comparison here in chapter 9 and verse 15, and look at Christ there, who provides redemption. 9 verse 15 says, and for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressors that were under the first testament, that's the law, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal what? Inheritance. So he provided redemption for them through the sacrifice of himself. You see where the book of Hebrews is going with this? To the Hebrew mind? I mean, if the body of Christ gets raptured up and we're taken out, right? And so it's just unbelievers in the earth, and then God resumes his prophetic program, and you're a Hebrew and you're an Israelite, and you read this. If you could read Hebrews, you're going to see that, man, you know what? There's the one that's a shadow, and there's the one that's the true one. And the true one was here all the time. He actually did come. He actually did die. He was buried. He rose again. Okay, he's resurrected to prove that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And by the way, he is the true heir of God. He is the true apostle. He's better than Moses. He is the priest, the high priest of God. And he's better than any other high priest before, because he took away an old covenant and he brings in a what? The new covenant, the New Testament, okay? And so you got to see that if you're an Israelite at that time. If you don't see that, I think an unlearned man can read this and see it, okay? And so if you don't see this, you just not want to see it, okay? As a Hebrew, you're out just like the Pharisees and the leadership of the nation of Israel, and the Sadducees and the scribes and all these guys in the nation of Israel. When Christ came, all the proof was there who he was, and they still did not want to see it because it affected the way that they were doing things, and they refused to receive him, they refused to accept him, and they rather crucified him. Okay? So it's not going to be that easy for the Jew to get saved after we're out of here. Okay? You got to believe what? The scriptures. Okay? Now, this guy stands, and there's no rest. There's no rest for the Old Testament priest, and the other one sits down. Okay? So let's go look at a couple of passages here. Look at chapter 10. Look at chapter 10, verse 11. He says, and every priest standeth daily, ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. Imagine you're a priest in the Old Testament. Here comes Des Strydom walking in here, Des Strydom from the tribe of Benjamin or from the tribe of whatever, Dan or whatever, He comes in here and says, man, I messed up, man. I just shouldn't have done this. And, here's my sacrifice, just my dove, or here's my whatever, And he makes the sacrifice for me and stuff like that and says, okay, you know what? And tomorrow I comes in and the priest stands there like, really? I'm going to do this again, and just continually, daily. He's daily standing in there making sacrifices. Okay? And so there's never rest for that, because he's not just dealing with one guy, he deals with 2 million other deserts, So you can imagine that, okay? And so look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 12. He says, but this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. No need to make new sacrifices daily. No need to die again daily. No need to, once for all, done. Okay? Done. And he sat down and rest. The Old Testament, the shadow, the Old Testament was not perfect, but obviously Christ was perfect, and He's perfect, right? Look at Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron? What is that verse basically saying? That priesthood could not make any man what? Perfect. Chapter 10 and verse 1. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto what? So it is just a all it does under the law and the priesthood, all you come is to know your knowledge of sin, that you are guilty. It only is a shadow of the better priesthood to come and the better sacrifice to come. Okay? Now, if I was an Israelite in my understanding of the scriptures now, I would read this and I would read this and say, praise the Lord, man. This is, I don't have to do these sacrifices. I don't have to continue doing this and remind myself, He's done it for me already. And so, but look at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 14. About the true new priesthood. For by one offering He hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Who's them that are sanctified? It's the believing remnant of Israel. For how long did He perfect them? Just for a period or forever? According to the verse, it's forever, right? Okay, now, there was a veil of cloth that separated the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary. Okay? It was a veil of cloth. But what would you think the new priesthood, God's high priest, Jesus Christ, after the order of Melchizedek, what was he, if it was cloth in the Old Testament that separated the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary, what would He be clothed with? A veil of flesh. Okay? The cloth, what was hanging between the Holy of Holies and the sanctuary, was a shadow of His flesh that will be torn and be broken. Okay? Let's have a look. Chapter 9, verse 2 and 3. I think this is, I know I can't see the excitement on your faces because you're like overwhelmed about what you're hearing now, but and I just keep telling myself that. But for me, I look at this stuff and I'm like, man, this is so cool. This is great stuff. Look at chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. Luke chapter 9, verse 2 and 3. For there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick and the table and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. Right? So that veil, what happened to that veil when Christ died? It was rent in twain. Now let's go see what was the sign, what was the shadow of. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19 and 20. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us, through the veil, that is to say, his what? Flesh. What has Israel now that they've never ever had before? In the Old Testament, the old priest had to make representation for them to enter into that. And he had to be clean before he goes in there, right? But now Christ has once for all entered in, and the veil, that veil was rent, and they have access, just like you and I can have access to the grace wherein we stand, directly to the throne of God, the Father. Israel has that same access by the blood of Christ. Okay? And that because of he's the ultimate high priest. They're going through him, through the death, for what he's done for them, the veil of flesh. The Old Testament priest, who was a shadow of what was to come, he had personal sins that he had to take care of too, and he had to make sacrifices for that personal sins. What do you think the new priesthood, or the ultimate priesthood, had? No sin, right? No sin. Okay. Look at Hebrews chapter 5. Look at Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 3. And by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for what? Sins. Not just for the people, this high priest, but he had to offer for himself. And by the way, when he enters in that and he had sin, what happened to that guy? He'll drop down dead, okay? Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without what? So he didn't have to make a sacrifice for his sin first, because he was not of man. He was God in the flesh, right? And that's the way that you could only make that sacrifice acceptable unto God, okay, for the world, all right? This Old Testament priest and the shadow was of the tribe of Levi. Where do you think the new priesthood, the true priesthood, Jesus Christ, of which tribe was he? Not all at once, okay? If the Old Testament tribe was of the tribe of Levi, where was the new priesthood from? Sorry? Judah. Okay, from Judah. Okay, and by the way, you remember under Solomon, after Solomon's sons took over and the kingdom was divided, that guy Jeroboam was not his son, but Jeroboam, he appointed priest that was not of the tribe of Levi, and that made God even more angrier with them. You guys go read that. It's an interesting thing. But okay, he's up with the tribe of Levi, chapter 7, verse 5. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they come out into the loins of Abram. So we have obviously a lot of priests today taking tithes, from the people today, and they must be Levites if they say you have to give my 10. I remember growing up, and I'm just growing up in the Dutch Reformed Church, every month, or every bi-weekly, I can't remember exactly, they will have a knock on the door on a Tuesday night. Tuk, 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 tuk. Open the door, and it will be the deacon from the Dutch Reformed Church, and he would come to receive our tithes. And he would write it in a book, and all that stuff. And so, if I knew what I knew now, I would have loved him to visit us those days, I said, are you the tribe of Levi to receive tithes? Just, they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so look at chapter 7, verse 14, the true priesthood. For it is evident that our Lord sprang out of who? Judah, of which the tribe of Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. Okay, it's a new way, man. It's God's. Oh, didn't I do that? Hebrews 7 verse 14. Now the old one was under the old covenant. The new one is what? Must be the new covenant, right? Look at Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 9. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 9. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. What covenant was that? It was the old covenant, right? Look at chapter 8 verse 8, the verse before this. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant. By the way, why was he making a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah? Who can tell me that? Why does he have to make a new covenant, not just with Israel, but with the house of Israel and the house of Judah? Because the house of Israel is represented by the 10 northern tribes, and the house of Judah by the southern tribes, 2 southern tribes. Who's with Judah? Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, right? So that's why he's addressing that. That's why you see in Matthew and in the book of Acts, because those tribes never got combined into the land, because after they went into captivity, they came out and they were still separated. That's why in the book of Acts, in the beginning of the book of Acts, you see Peter after Pentecost say, Ye men of Israel, ye men of Judea. He's addressing 2 groups of people, okay, which should be one people. What did I say? Chapter 8 verse 8 says, And finding fault with them, he said, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand and led them out of the land of Egypt. By the way, when he made that covenant, what covenant is that talking about? When he brought them out into Egypt, what did they get when they came out of Egypt? When God led them out of the hand of Egypt, what covenant did God give them? What covenant did he enter into them? Remember, 3 months after they came out of Egypt, at Mount Sinai, God gave them the covenant of the law. Was that a conditional covenant, or was that an unconditional covenant? It was a conditional covenant, because the condition says, if you obey me, I'll bless you. If you don't obey me, I'll what? Curse you. Was there an unconditional covenant in the Old Testament besides this conditional covenant? Was there an unconditional covenant of God before this conditional covenant of the law of Moses? Yes or yes? Yes. Because God entered with Abraham into the covenant of circumcision and in the covenant of promise. What did he promise them? A great nation and a seed and a kingdom. That's God's never going to change that. That covenant stayed. Okay? But it will be realized with the fulfillment of the new covenant. But you've got to take the old out of the way and replace it with a new covenant for that covenant to come true. Okay? So, the Old Testament shadow of the priesthood was where? On the earth. Where is the new priest? The new priesthood, Christ. In heaven, right? Let's go look. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 4. For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law. He is not of the earth, because the Old Testament priest was priest after the what? The law. And they were on the earth. You with me? Look at chapter 8 verse 1. You're right there. Now the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest who was set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the what? He's not on the earth, because he's not making offering according to the law. At the time that they were writing this, was there priest in Israel that was still making offering according to the law? Yes. Yes. And he's now showing the Hebrew, things are changing. There's a new covenant coming in, guys, and the stuff has changed for you. And so, chapter 4 verse 14 says, Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast to our profession. So if you lived 2,000 years ago, you receive a letter, the epistle of the Hebrews, by the way, because this epistle was known to Israel, and to specifically to the believing remnant of Israel. They read it at that time in conjunction, in parallel with the Apostle Paul. They must have read this epistle. Do you agree with me? It was not written only after God gave Israel up, okay? And so that was written during that time. And as a priest, as an Israelite in those time, or not an Israelite, the believing remnant of Israel, if you read this and you get this information, what do you understand? I don't have to go to the where? I don't have to make offering anymore, because who's made the offering for me once for all already? Jesus Christ. Okay, things have changed in Israel, and they refused to obviously see. The believing remnant saw it, the small part of the believing remnant. The rest of them didn't. They just carried on under that old covenant. And so what's going to happen when we're taken out? Unbelieving Israel is going to have to read this and going to say, wow, no. We don't have to go to temples. We don't have to make sacrifices. We don't have to do all these things. Because we have a high priest eternal in the heavens. We have a high priest making intercession for us. We have a high priest that once for all made a sacrifice by his blood for us, to sanctify us and to redeem us and to give us eternal life. That's what, as a believing remnant, you have to come to the conclusions when you read this. Okay? Any questions? You want to close that? I'm not going to start the next session unless you want to continue with any questions or any statements or anything that you have that you pick up from this, or that maybe learn from this, or that you... Yes?
Can you explain a little better who Melchizedek is?
Didn't I explain good enough for you?
I don't know who he is.
Melchizedek just showed up. Boom! He's there. It doesn't tell us where he comes from, and it doesn't tell us where he went to. He just showed up. He was the king of Salem. Go back with me to Genesis. Go back with me to Genesis. Genesis chapter 14, I think. It's in my notes, but I have to turn. Let me see. Genesis chapter 14. Let me see the notes. I want to get the right. Yeah, verse 18. Chapter 14, verse 17. So this is when Abraham is. There was a battle of the kings. Lot is taken a prisoner. Abraham rescues Lot, and then we have here where Melchizedek shows up suddenly. He just shows up. Okay.
Could I say, please repeat the question for the benefit of
Okay. All right. The question was, can you explain a little better? Which was a question I've already explained, by the way. I'm just telling you guys. No, I didn't explain it. Where does Melchizedek come from? And how can you explain better how he was a priest and a king? That's the question, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. And as I said to you, he just showed up. There was no preliminary to him. This guy he's up there, and we learn he's a priest. He was a priest before the law even was. He was a priest, and he was a king. Look at chapter 14. Look at chapter 14, verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of the Chedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him, and the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. So you see two things about Melchizedek. He shows up there. We don't know where's his beginning, and we don't know where his end is. Just like Christ, he has no beginning and he has no end. But he's a king of Salem. Salem means what? Peace. He's a king of peace, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. So he was a king and a priest. Who is the king and priest of Israel? Jesus Christ. Okay? And it says, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand, and he gave him tithes of all. So Abraham gave him tithes of all. But so here's the thing is, this Melchizedek, he shows up and then guess what? You just don't know what happens with this guy. All right? And so that is after the order. Aaron, we know where Aaron comes from. We know how he's instituted, how he has to be replaced. Well, but Melchizedek, he's before the law even. Right before the law, he shows up there, and he's a king and he's a priest of the Most High God. There is no priest in Israel's history that was a king. And there was no king in Israel's history that was a priest. And by the way, Israel only started when? After Abraham, but the nation of Israel wasn't given birth to until when? They came out of Egypt as a people. They went in as a family and they came out as a people. Right? This king and priest was way before the law. And he was a king and a priest, which is a shadow of what? The order that was going to come. That's all I can give you about that. Yes?
It says in my Bible that the meaning of his name is called King of Righteousness.
King of Righteousness? Yeah. So, you know,
He was like a type of
he was a shadow of what was going to come, okay? But what we know about Melchizedek, there's no beginning and there's no end. There is no father and mother ascribed to him. And you want me to speak to that thing? Oh, ask the question.
When somebody asks a question, please repeat it.
Okay, the question was, she said her Bible says, the note she has in her Bible says, he was the king of Salem in the king of righteousness. Okay? Well, the meaning of that, you know. And so, what I understand from what I did before and researched was Salem being peace, but, righteousness is not bad as well, because he is the king of, he's the king of righteousness, right? And so, yeah. All right, so what we do next time we'll get into chapter 5, the first 10 verses, maybe the full chapter, because what happens is chapter 5 goes straight into chapter 6, and I need to be there together, really, okay? And so we'll get into that stuff the next time. Thank you, guys.